The only way that you can have a genuine relationship is if you value your soul above your body, which means to say that you value the eternal part of yourself far more than the mortal part of yourself. Because the mortal part of yourself is so busy defending itself, it's so busy warding off that hateful thing that it's just not available to anybody else. There's a hum. There's a hum in the speakers. I remember a story I heard a long time ago, long before I ever even dreamt of being a public speaker. I was just a shy kid in yeshiva. Somebody told a story about a guy who traveled and gave lectures. He was a scholar, but he wasn't very conscious of his audience. He liked to hear himself talk. One day he's giving this lecture, some pilpul that he's giving. And most of the people are sleeping and daydreaming, except for one guy who was sitting in the front row, who was nodding vigorously, obviously approving of what he was saying. Then all of a sudden, at some point in the speech, the guy is going, so he thinks, oh, he's disagreeing. Well, I'll prove that I'm right. And he marshaled some proof, and he brought quotes and so on. And after a while, the guy is saying, so he goes on with his speech. After a while, the guy is going, so again, he marshals arguments, and he proves, and finally, the speech is over. So he goes directly to this guy, and he says, tell me, where did you study? He says, me? I'm a farmer. Never studied. He says, then what were you agreeing with or disagreeing with my statements? How do you? He says, no. He says, I had a goat that got lost. I lost a goat. And when you were speaking from a certain angle, you looked like my goat. And I was thinking, yeah, this is my goat. But then you turned a little bit and I said, nah, that's... But then from another angle, I thought, yeah, well, maybe you are my goat. He says, finally I decided, you are a goat, but you're not mine. It's a pretty scary story. You can get up and make a goat of yourself. Moshe, thank you very much for the introduction. But I want to tell you a little more about myself. Something Moshe didn't mention. There's something in me that makes me very uncomfortable with other people. It goes something like this. There's a divine part that is eternal, that always was and always will be. That's the godly soul. Then there's the animal soul that is born when you're born and it dies when you die. But knowing the godly soul, it gets jealous. And it hates to think that it is not as eternal as the godly soul, so it makes like it's eternal. It tries to act like it's forever. It tries to act like it's God, actually. And as a result, not only am I insulted if you insult me, not only am I threatened if you threaten me, I can't stand you just for the fact that you exist. Because if you exist and you're not part of me, then I am not God. Then I am not everything. You're threatening my existence simply by existing. the nature of the animal soul. I need to be. If you are and find no need for me, then my existence is diminished, and I can't stand that. So just knowing that you exist makes me very uncomfortable. You're my enemy, just by being. That's the honest truth. Now I'm supposed to talk to you about relationships. How can two people, any two people, have a relationship with this kind of animal soul in them? This is how we're made. This is how we are. The fact that you exist disturbs my existence. Unless you become my satellite, unless you're an extension of me. And what often happens in marriage and in relationships is that at first it's a challenge to get you to be on my side. Because the more people I get on my side, the more my existence is substantiated and the less competition I have. So I need everybody to be on my side. So at first, finding a wife, making a friend, this is a great challenge. And when we succeed, it feels very good because it reinforces my existence. But once I get there, once I've achieved that, I don't need you anymore. Once I've gotten your approval, once you have reinforced my existence, what do I need you for after that? So once we get married, you start telling me what you need. I don't want to hear that. I'm not interested in that. Particularly if what you need doesn't interest me at all. So now you get to be a burden. Now you're a liability. I need to go out and make more friends. I need to get more satellites to my existence. And you're keeping me at home. Well, I don't like that. So how are we going to have relationships? Another thing. In my insecurity, in my need to be God, I need to know everything. You can't keep secrets from me. So if we're going to get married, I'm going to be very curious about those things you're not revealing. You can give me and show me all sorts of wonderful things. I'm interested in what you're not telling me. I want to know what you're hiding. I don't want to know what you're good at. I want to know what you're bad at. I don't want to know what your strengths are. I want to know your weaknesses. I don't want to know what you're good for. I want to emphasize what you're not good for. Because I'm insecure if you're keeping secrets. So if you come into my house and into my life and you say, there's a certain curtain I keep drawn, please don't look. I say, aha, that's where I gotta look. I gotta know what's going on behind that curtain. How are we going to have a relationship? It almost seems that human nature doesn't allow for relationships. What in me, what part of our personality makes it possible to coexist with another human being? In fact, when it comes to Avas Yisrael, the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew, Chassidus explains, what is loving your fellow Jew? It's such a vague, open-ended sentiment. When Hillel said, what is hateful to you, don't do to others, he was talking about a specific, well-known thing that is hateful to everybody. And that's what we don't do to others if we're going to love them. What is this thing? The thing that everybody hates, that is the ultimate hateful thing, that is the source of all other hateful things. The reason it bothers me so much that you don't respect me, the reason it bothers me so much when you say, that speech wasn't so good, the reason it bothers me so much when you say, you know, you need a new hat, or you don't know everything. I know I don't know everything. And yet it disturbs me when you say it. I know I need a new hat. Why does it irk me when you remind me of it? It can't be that I hate so many things. There is one thing that is hateful. And all these little things are just parts of that one thing. The one thing is, my animal soul, my mortal soul, lives in fear of its own mortality. And mortality doesn't mean that I will someday die. Mortality means that when they add it all up, when it comes to the tally, I will turn out to be a zero. That's what I hate. If I were sure that on a scale of 1 to 10, you consider me a 2, I would settle for that, if I could be sure. My problem is that when you say, well, you're not a 10, I immediately panic, because what I'm expecting you to say is, you're not even a 1. If I was confident, if I was absolutely sure that you consider me a 2, I would be content. There's a woman at Beis Chana once. We were having a long, heated discussion about what she should do and where she's coming from, where she's going, and what's going to be with her life, and so on. And she was having a hard time. She had to struggle all her life. It was an uphill battle all the way, and so on. So I said to her, tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think you are? Honest. She says, well, I think I'm a 8.5. She says, what do you think I am? I said, I'm quite sure you're about a 1.5. She got very upset. She disagreed. And didn't talk to me for a while. But in the end, we became good friends. If I could be sure that you consider me a 1.5, it wouldn't bother me. The thing that is hateful is not to be considered a 1. The only thing that is hateful is to be considered a 0. So I go around carrying this suspicion with me that any day now, somebody is going to discover that I am a 0. And I hate that. So as soon as you say, you know, you need a new hat, something triggers in my mind. Oh, here we go. First I need a new hat, then I need a new head, a new soul. As I am, I'm worthless. If I knew it would stop at the hat, I wouldn't mind. That's what is hateful. And that's what we mustn't do to others. If you're going to have a relationship, the first thing is, do not say anything or do anything that's going to trigger this suspicion in the person you're having a relationship with. Don't do anything that will ever suggest that, in your opinion, this person is a 0. How do you do that? The Rebbe says in Tanya, people who put their body above their soul, who value their body above their soul, cannot have a true relationship. They're incapable of true relationships. They can only have a love that is dependent on a third thing. Ahava hatluya b'davar. A love dependent on a third thing. If they happen to share a love for a common thing, that love will bring them together. If one of them loses interest in that common thing, or the common thing disappears, like money, then the relationship is over. The only way that you can have a genuine relationship is if you value your soul above your body, which means to say that you value the eternal part of yourself far more than the mortal part of yourself. Because the mortal part of yourself is so busy defending itself, it's so busy warding off that hateful thing that it's just not available to anybody else. If that's where you put your emphasis, if that's where you live, then you're not available to anybody else. The only way you can be available to someone is if you put your soul before your body. If you value your soul far more than you value your body. Which means that you value the Jew in you value the son or daughter in you, you value what you received from the past that has come down to you. Those things are what are important in your life. And your particular individual condition is not so important. Now you're available to another person. When you see the other person the same way you see yourself, when you look at another person, you look at what's eternal about them and not what is temporary, then you've made a real connection. When would you look at another person and see what's eternal? If you look at yourself that way. And that's what it means, love your fellow Jew as you love yourself. The way you love yourself, that's the way you're going to love your fellow Jew. If you love the eternal part of yourself, then you will have a true relationship with the other person. If you love within yourself the temporary, the mortal, the individual, then the only way you can connect to the other person is if there's a third interest that connects you and brings you together, and if that third interest disappears, the relationship is over. All of Yiddishkeit is geared towards enabling relationships, because the primal relationship is our relationship with God. Every mitzvah we do, every time we do a mitzvah, we're basically giving precedent to the soul over the body. We're saying that the eternal values are more important than the temporary ones. And that's why marriage in Yiddishkeit is so crucial. It's not just another mitzvah. It's the sign of holiness. It's the state of holiness, because only in holiness can there be union. In the worldly world, in the animal soul, there is never union. That's why Hasidus says that if a person has a problem with his Yiddishkeit, he should sit down with a friend and work it out. And he will succeed, because he will have two godly souls against one animal soul. So the question is, when you have two people discussing a problem, it's not two godly souls against one animal soul. It's two animal souls and two godly souls. So why are we guaranteed success? And the answer is, when two people sit down, their godly souls communicate, their animal souls don't. So if we're talking about my problem, my weakness, then there's only one animal soul involved. Because your animal soul has no interest in my animal soul. Animal souls are selfish. So when two people are sitting and talking together, it's two godly souls against one animal soul. There is no union in unholiness. It happens only in holiness. A couple of practical thoughts on relationships, marriage. First of all, marriage is not the beginning, but a continuation of life. Marriage means your parents got married before you were born, it continues into your marriage, your children are born. It's a continuum. This being the case, it makes sense that a marriage should in some way reflect what came before it. Makes a lot of sense that a daughter marries a man like her father. A son marries a woman like his mother. That's where we're coming from. That's what we're continuing. There should be some similarity there. In fact, it's a wonderful idea. When you're looking to choose a partner, when you're thinking, what kind of a person should I marry? Start from the beginning. Start from the beginning. What kind of a person did your father marry? What kind of a person did your mother marry? I know, the question is, what if your mother married a shlemazel? What if your father married a disaster? It's a good question. But it doesn't change the fact. You've got to start with what you have. You want more than what you have? Gesundheit, good luck. Try your best. Be better. Accomplish more. Have a more open relationship. Have a more articulate relationship. Whatever it is you want. But start at the beginning. Start with what you saw. Start with what is familiar. If you can do better, by all means, grow from there. But don't try to start a whole new project, unfamiliar, untested, because you're treading water. Obviously, this doesn't mean that the person you marry has to have the same values as your father or mother. Values change. They don't have to read the same books. Books change. They don't have to wear the same clothing. Styles change. And they don't have to have the same commitment to Yiddishkeit. That comes and goes. But the personality should be the same. If your father was a very ambitious, responsible, hardworking, no-nonsense guy, don't tell me you want a romantic person. You wouldn't know what to do with him. And you don't need it. You want somebody a little bit more romantic than your father? Gesundheit. But start with what your father had. This woman comes and tells me that she has a husband who is very loyal, devoted, nice, good. He comes home, takes care of this and that. But it's really bothering her that he's not romantic. I know this woman. So I said to her, if your husband ever brought flowers home or put a record on, you'd throw him out of the house. What do you mean you want him to be romantic? You wouldn't know what to do with it. If he brought home flowers, you'd scream at him for wasting money. Because you are a practical, no-nonsense, responsible person. If he started acting romantic, you take him to a doctor. It's a little difficult for people to admit that they are not romantic, but very few people are. Very few people are. It's too expensive. You've got to live, you've got to be what you have, what you were raised with, what you were given. If you succeed at that and can go on to even more, then you've done something. But to say, no, I don't want to be good at what they were good at. I want to be good at a whole new thing. If it's a whole new thing, you're on your own. You're making it up as you go along. You've got no script, you've got no map, you've got no tracks. So if it doesn't work, don't be surprised. Another thing, if you're not going to look for someone like your father or like your mother, the possibilities become endless. How many people are not like your father? Just about everybody. How are you going to pick from this endless possibility? You got to have a starting point. You got to begin with something. So if a guy is going to be imperfect, if a woman is not going to be everything, if she's going to have some faults, let her have your mother's faults. Those are familiar. Your father handled it. You can handle it. If your husband is going to be imperfect, let him have your father's imperfections. At least there are no surprises. And if he's going to have strengths, he has to have at least your father's strengths. Because if he doesn't have that, what kind of mensch is this? The second thing. There will be things, inevitably, about the other person that the other person is uncomfortable with. Your job is to protect that sensitive area and help them keep it private. It is very healthy for a husband and wife to have a private space. To dafka want to see what's behind this curtain, what's behind the mask, is not nice. Like they used to say in Yiddish, a schlechter Mensch. It's simply not nice to go tearing people's masks off, unless you get paid to do that. It's not nice to go poking behind the curtain that a person spent so much time and so much effort putting up. Our responsibility to each other is to be sensitive to each other's sensitivities. Not to ridicule them, not to be uncomfortable with them, but to be sensitive about it. If I marry you, I take responsibility for you. And that includes your weaknesses. It includes your sensitivities. It includes your mask. It includes your privacy. Final thing is, if we're going to have a relationship, I have to be very one-sided about it. I can't constantly be measuring your response to me. I have to be single-minded that my job is to take care of you. If I'm constantly measuring, questioning, am I giving more than I'm getting? Are you getting the better end of the deal? Am I more than you deserve, but you're not more than I deserve? If I'm constantly questioning that, I'm undermining the whole relationship. Because a relationship, if it means anything, means the application of goodness in everyday life. That's what marriage is. If you have any goodness, if you have any virtue, if you have any love, if you have any compassion, if you have any kindness, if you have any loyalty and devotion, what are you doing with all that stuff? What are you doing with it? What are you going to do with it? Applying goodness to everyday life is marriage. The person who says, I have so much love to give, but my wife isn't interested. Not true. Nobody can resist being loved. You're holding back. Why are you holding back? Who are you saving it for? If you have love to give it to the person you're married to. You say, well, but she doesn't love me back, or I love her more than she loves me, or I loved her 2 years and she's only loved me 1.5 years. When I ask her, she doesn't say convincingly that she loves me, and she only said it once this week. If we're worried about that, then we're coming from the animal soul. The animal soul isn't capable of loving anybody ever. The godly soul is perfectly willing to love the person you're married to. So do it. And the same with children. The person who says, I have a lot of love to give, but somehow it's not working out with my children. Save it. Be proud of the fact that you have a lot of love to give. What good is this? Who are you saving it for? Later on in life, we realize this was not a chachma. So to sum it up, the problem with relationships is that one person's existence threatens the other person's existence by nature of our animal soul. If you look at me the wrong way, if you in any way imply that you are not a satellite in my existence, then you are my enemy. No in between. You are either mine or you're my enemy. That's the nature of the animal soul. If we're coming from that place, if we're coming from the animal soul's orientation, then forget relationships. It's a myth. It's a game. If we're coming from the godly soul, then we need to do 3 things. Number 1, be there unconditionally. You have goodness, you have kindness, you have love, give it. Don't keep taking your pulse all the time. Don't save it. Give it to the person you're married to. Number 2, don't look where you're not invited. Don't be curious and determined to dafka see what the other person doesn't want to show. And thirdly, work with what you know. Don't get off into fantasies. Don't try to build your life around a fictional character. Work with reality. Start from where you grew up and work from there. Then the relationship will be a blessing for generation after generation, because that's what marriage is. It's the beginning of all the future generations. And so when we bless a couple who are setting off into married life, we say this should be a binyan adei ad. It should be an eternal edifice, a structure that will last forever, because it does last forever. It carries over from generation to generation and so on. You're going to marry someone like your father, your daughter, your son will marry someone like you. You marry someone like your mother, your daughter will marry someone like you. And by the way, let's assume your mother didn't do a wonderful job. You've got complaints. She wasn't so good at communicating, she wasn't so good at advising, she wasn't so good at expressing her feelings, she didn't mother, she didn't bond, whatever the words are. And the result is you. Now you're going to get married, and you're terrified that you're going to do to your daughter what your mother did to you. And so you hesitate. First you hesitate getting married. Then you're finally married, you hesitate having children. You finally have children, you hesitate to say anything to them. You're not sure if you should ever discipline them because maybe that's going too far. Or you need to discipline them a lot because your mother didn't. What could be the worst thing? If you made every mistake your mother made. What could be the worst thing? That your daughter will be like you. And have the same complaints to you that you have to your mother. So what's so terrible? What's so terrible? In fact, by today's standards, that would be considered great success. We should wish it on ourselves. Our mother wishes it on us. You should have a daughter like that. Would be a blessing. That would be a blessing. If we could know that 30 years from now, our daughters will be sitting here talking about how imperfect their mother was, that would be wonderful. So don't hesitate. Make your mother's mistakes. Have children like yourself. With a little help, they'll have greater opportunity. They'll do a little better than you. And then you have something to show for all your efforts. Something that can never be taken away. In the final analysis, there are a couple of people in the world to whom you really count. Only a couple. No matter what you do, there are only a few people to whom you really count. You've got to make the most of it.
We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal, it's questions and answers, it's conversation. It's really relaxed, it's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program, there's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it, just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us, take a look, click the link below and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.